Interviewing my grandfather, Charles Stewart Tullis, to gather the past of our family's history, culture, and heritage, I was able to gather stories of what previous generations of my family had offered to the world, and learned that long before me, my family had been advocates for diversity, social justice, and fought against the prejudiced nature of the environment that they grew up in. In the early 1900s, Charles's grandfather, Charles J.G. Tullis, arrived on a boat from Scotland, seeking out Dunellen, Florida, the town which I still currently reside in. At the time, Dunellen was in the middle of a phosphate boom. Charles was seeking a new opportunity and worked as a project manager in the town. Charles's grandmother, Elsie, passed away in the early 1910s from a flu epidemic, followed a few short years later by Charles. This left the youngest child to be orphaned and taken in by a local family named the Picketts. At the same time, my grandfather's grandfather on his mother's side, Baldwin, was a local doctor in town. Back in these days, doctors didn't make the living that they do now. Baldwin would often care for many patients pro bono and struggle to receive payments from his clients. But Baldwin had his own set of values. With his skills and training as a doctor, it was his duty to take care of those who were in need, without regard to race. There are families in Dunellen who have been patients of my great-great-grandfather, and then along to my grandfather for generations. I have memories of doing house calls with my grandfather, and he would sit on the porch with an elderly African-American woman, and they would talk and reminisce, remembering his grandfather when they were younger. Baldwin was so popular in the town that when he passed away during the 50s, that most of the town came to his funeral. At the funeral, my grandfather recalls the funeral director approaching my great-great-grandmother and informing her that many African Americans had gathered and were attempting to attend the funeral. The funeral director wanted to turn them away. However, my great-great-grandmother was disgusted at the idea and informed the funeral director that any who wanted to remember her husband were welcome. This willingness for change in the way we see our peers led to many future Tellises to pursuing careers and helping others. My grandfather, of course, became a doctor, while his sister Ellie and also her husband were both social workers. His brother David became a teacher. This continued through the years as my grandfather married a teacher, and their daughter also became a teacher, as did Ellie's daughter. Of David's 4 children, 3 teach in the Orlando area, while 1 works as an EMT. Of that group, the most socially active of them all was Ellie. Ellie recently retired from her career in social work, working primarily with abused women. But ever since she was young, it was known Ellie would be an advocate for social justice. As a young girl and segregation still active in Dunellen, Ellie would spend time with whoever she pleased, based on who she judged someone as a person, and not by the color of their skin. This angered certain figures in the town, and eventually escalated to the point where the Ku Klux Klan burnt a cross in front of my great-grandmother's home. Examining the family history on my grandfather's side, I see little bias when it comes to race, ethnicity, or any type of prejudice. This side of my family is where I believe I get my sense of social justice and personal responsibility for striving for the human rights of all.